Today is January 19th. I'm in New Zealand, small town, and I've been locked down because of the COVID for more than 2 years. Being alone because I split up with my partner when I came, and I found that the time I have being alone is a very interesting experience to look into myself and pursue the path I have been going on, which is, you can call it the spiritual path. Basically, it's to pursue, to know myself well and connect to the root of my being. I had the awakening experience that I thought was a big one, kind of like a Kensho, Satori in Japanese, or we can call it awakening. This was in 2000, 22 years ago. After that, well, before that, I've been interested in Zen and meditation. And after that awakening experience for 8 years or so, I looked every which direction about the meaning of the experience and studied the scriptures, the sutras, books from not just in Zen or Buddhism, but also Christianity and all others, Yoga Sutra, Meister Eckhart, Sufis, and all of that, to make sense of what is going on. It's about to know thyself, as I mentioned, and the conclusion of that 8 years I have summarized in a Japanese website, and the summary sentence is, "Thy will be done." So at the root of my being, there's all that thy will, the God will, if you may call it, which is basically, in my term, from my engineering background, I want to use not the word God, but the law of nature or the law of the universe that is prevailing all the time. And I'm a result of that to be born, and to live is mainly or purely based upon thy will. Everything happens according to the law of nature. And I'm like floating on the wave of life, being aware what's going on, but at the root of it is in the scripture, Tao Te Ching, they talk it darkness within darkness. It's the will of the universe, which is functioning all the time. So we are like a little particle on the wave of the ocean floating up and down, and I sense that's the way it is, because what you have in mind is very limited, and you cannot get to know the root of the being, thy will. But you can relate to that, and you can understand it, and you can connect with that, because you have to be connected, because you are the result of that, and it is happening every moment. Therefore, thy will be done is the solution of my search. And after that, I went into various directions, including my divorce, because I split up with my ex-wife because of different orientation. I was more interested in this field, but she wasn't. And I was into the nature, and she was more into the town and activities. So we split up, and then had a relationship, and lastly, I met this woman for the last 7 years or so until we split up. And now I'm alone again. Well, again, I have had long relationship of marriage and all of that, but I realized that this is a great moment to happen, that I can look into myself more deeply. And that's the started from, I think, 2019 November. So more than 2 years I've been in New Zealand in a house that I have by the ocean, up on the hill, diving, swimming, catching fish, even catching eel, and garden to have the the vegetables, and catch food from the ocean, seaweed, anything. Almost living like a monk life, except with the friendship, the friends I developed in this small town, which has been very stimulating, and I have been enjoying the way I live. It happened to be like this, but that's what it is. So many of the videos, maybe, I don't know, 100 of them, may have been developed in the last 2 years and a half or something like that, but all oriented to this spiritual path I've been taking and connecting to my first experience of awakening called Banga from the Vipassana's 10-day retreat, which is summarized in English in my webpage that I posted. But the sense of what's been happening and the way I found how I live has been very beneficial for me. I'm at 73, going 74 years old, and I recorded, but it didn't work well, so I'm recording this morning as I watch the sun coming out and the ocean far away. Well, actually, it's not far, right there. To the east, I can see the sunrise. And from my bed, also, I can see north, the island, and also to the left is the hill or the mountain where the pine tree is standing and watching me from out there. So that's the setting of where I am. And the meaning of this video is just spend a little time to look at my life. As I said, I posted various videos, but not in this form, to reflect more spontaneously. And what I want to do is just to capture some of the events happened yesterday, what's going on in my day, and how I'm processing. And I call it New Hero's Journey these days, to relate to what I've been doing in this journey of life. New hero because it's a challenge, exploration, but also integrating all of the experience of the past with a spiritual orientation, and to be able to explain it mainly for myself is to be sincere, honest, sincere and truthful of my being, so that I can maintain or connect to the root of my being and live my life as it is meant to be, as I see it. Or I should say, I doesn't exist because that's what it is, because of the relationship to the root of my being. When you put emphasis to the connection of it, it is such that perhaps you may call in Christian the relationship to the God. Your small being, the God or the nature of the universe is much, 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 much bigger, infinitely more intelligent or wise. So how to relate to that is very important. To the point of relationship is flipped, that you are like a little bubbles on the surface of the ocean, and thy will is prevailing everywhere. So I'm the witness of how the life is going on, and trying to make sense so that when my mind goes into the wrong way, then I notice it and then get back on track to the way. Like Tao Te Ching talk about the way, or the way of um, spirituality, connecting to the root of our being, and appreciate the fact I can live, and therefore continue this path. And the point here is just to summarize some of the key events of yesterday and this morning, such that I can reflect and possibly get back here a few years later or whatever the time is, to see how I have been living on this journey of my life. So it's a long intro about how I spend the time, but it's important to have some context of why I'm doing it. So how I spend the time, it started by noticing the quiet evening, and now the quiet morning still continues. No wind. The sun is gentle in the evening, and I see the blue sky, and down toward the horizon is a little orangish color, and into the ocean of blue. It's to the east. The ocean is right there. I even see the island, the familiar sight, and the Purutakawa trees. The flowers gone and sitting or standing quietly. Outside the window to the north is the ocean and island. Similar picture. No clouds this morning. Yesterday I saw a pink clouds scattered here and there. Was very beautiful. But today there's no cloud. The pine tree on the left on the hill is standing quietly. Yesterday was a little breeze, but today there's no breeze. He's just standing there as if watching me from outside the window, and I always go check how the tree is standing when I'm laying down on the bed like I'm doing right now. The birds are quiet. Yesterday I saw lots of seagulls flying around. Oh, there's just a sparrow came here right outside my window, looking at me, making little noise. Seemed to be busy looking for a little food, but active, jumping around. So on the right is also on top of the roof downstairs. That, there are pipes I laid down for using the solar to have a shower when I come out of the ocean. Yesterday, usually, every day these days, I take shower. And it's very handy just connecting to the faucet, and the water goes up to the roof and then come back with hot water, and then I take shower. It's kind of like a wildlife, and I enjoy not using electricity, but nature's way. And it costs perhaps $30, $40 at the most to buy the pipe, black pipe that heat will be retained from the sun, and I have this hot shower. Not in the winter time, but the most of the year, or at least 60%, I have good shower. So back to the event of yesterday, I had gone through some work, writing email, or doing some work through the video conferencing about the software development with this company. I invested some money. And writing email or going through the web is very typical. And I may spend a fair amount of time with the computer because I have all the information out there. When I look at the desktop, I feel that desktop with different files represent what's in my brain. But if I look at the content and the emphasis of what that information is, I would say 60-70% is on spiritual stuff. So many information from different history, resources, reference materials. Even the software I was talking about is related to the health of the mind, body, and life for the company I put my money, as I mentioned. So my computer represents almost like what's in my mind. And with the window of the internet, I can access so much information. So back to the desktop, I can see some areas like what you need to do with the legal issue or tax or the necessities of life that is captured there. I have the hobby-oriented file, which is not a huge amount because most of it is on the web I can access. In fact, I have Facebook pages related to my personal page, work-related, and AI, because the technology is bringing out so much change in our life, so I have to keep up with it. Also related to investment, there's a big chunk of file, hobby and the fun-related file. Relationship, specifically, I don't know if I have, but it's all in the text and the email file, mostly. But of course, my friends related information captured in the file. Finance is there, as I mentioned. And the health related information is there, but mainly through the internet. And also I have a Facebook page on the health so that I can capture the concerns about the health. So I mentioned that I have this idea of the life profile, which monitors how I'm living my life every 3 months or so for the last 20 plus years, which is dividing my key activities into one, which is the most important: be sincere and truthful. That's the main area of the concern, which may represent 70% of the activities of the spiritual stuff. But that's one of the measurements of how I see it important and how satisfied I am in that category. And then I have a work, hobby, relationship, health, and finance, 6 items. So that is essence of how I structure the key element of my life. And I monitor it, like I said, every 3-4 months. And I've been doing it for the last 20 years, 20 plus years. So that the desktop represent that, my life represent that, although all the social engagement and the stuff I need to do would get into the way, but also related to how I'm navigating my life. That sounds like an engineer's way of looking at my life, But that activity I started after the awakening of 2000, year 2000, because I wanted to make sure that I have a good balance in life and I feel happy in going through it. I use the word PDCA, plan, do, check, act, and going through the cycle of review and identify the area of importance, lessons learned, the problems that I've observed, and the summary of those events, and highlighting the issue that they need to work on. So it's continuously reviewing every 3-4 months and make sure that I'm on top of it. So this video is extra version of it because I haven't done this way, but just to see how I'm doing in this day, yesterday and today, I'm living, how I'm living. So that's the context of what's going on. Back to the review of yesterday, therefore, there are those events, talking or sharing with the friends, few email and text. One was with Dan talking about the business issue and also having fun with him and sharing the event. I had sent the email to Christine, who I share the spiritual stuff, and we may do something together on this topic. So I keep up with her, what's going on, and we have a fairly frequent communication because she lives in the town, much younger than me, but in the similar direction that we want to share the process of living life and expanding this idea, not just living, but in relation to the society, so what we can do with them, and in her case, to make living out of that. In my case, I'm more retired, but still wanting to contribute, so we have some similar concerns, so that's another item. I was sending some email related to the business and the company I'm a director, that we are talking about how to orchestrate the board. I proposed some suggestion. The company chairperson has sent me some information yesterday or the day before, so I was responding back, and it takes time. I use my brain and mind to respond to those. So let me just touch on that. The way I see it happening is not just like a task by itself, but it's melted into the way I live. So let me explain what I mean. It may be redundant and not interesting if there's anyone listening to this, but to me it's fairly important. So back to the subject of the mind, I use the word two universes. There's a universe in the mind, but the universe elsewhere, which represent how the world is functioning, the universe is functioning, and that relate to the root of our being. So the mind is just a phenomena as we develop as a human, that we can utilize the brain and the mind to navigate our life, but that's not the all of it. Because the root of us is the living being, and the mind may not relate to that as much because mind is using the word and the logic and figure out what to do. And I realized that I spent huge amount of time and thinking that as if that's the whole of my life, but it's just the surface, like a bubble or the wave of the ocean, but the root of the ocean and the connection to that. And if we lose that and live in the mind only, that's a limited being. So back to this issue about mail, writing a mail, I can use my brain and just respond according to what I can capture, anything that pops up in my mind to write a letter, but that does not represent the whole of it. And that's the realization I have. What it means is that when I write, I may gather information from the brain, the surface part of the brain, I want to call it, or within the mind, you develop something. And then I try to connect to the root of my being when I write, but usually it doesn't work like that, because get to the root of the being takes time and energy, and you want to listen to what would come out from the root of the being related to that subject. So sounds like a long story, but to me that represents how the spiritual life may constitute a way that makes sense, so that that alignment of who we are, what's in the mind, is connected to the root of being. So related to that mail writing, because it has impact to me as well as for others, but because of the company is in the healthcare and impacting the customers, what we decide at the board level would have a major impact to the outcome through the management practice, prioritizing things, and out to the customer so that the customer can have the maximum benefit. So, for example, if the board is constituted or constructed with the people, and if they have a different view, which is natural, but we have to have a sense as a board, goal congruence, to agree upon what to be done in executing through the governing process, principle way, and connected to the management and the execution of the plans and out to the customers, whether through software development and the practice of it and the execution of how the customer may use the software and how clinicians and the management may monitor and relate to that. And if we don't do that well, of course, I'm a board member or also a major shareholder, I'm failing. And this is very serious business. I'm laughing, but people may not realize how serious it is, because it's not just money or procedure, but we have to understand why we do it, how we do it, who is to what, in what sequence, and how the goal congruence is established at the top, how the communication is made with the management, how we manage the process, plan to check act, not just procedure following the law and doing things at the spur of the moment, but there has to have some coordinated effort. So on one hand, I talk about my life and the journey, but because of the connection to the society and the importance on the board member, I have to make the best judgment and communicate the message within the board first. And if I cannot do it well, because of my biased way or not connecting to my root or not being able to express in a concise and easy to understand manner for other board members, then I'm failing the step. So my life to live the best is to be connected to how I function in the society through the company. Using this example, it's just the board, but I have a client, I interface, and I, through that interface, which I've been doing for the last 35, 40 years, related to the books and even the last book, Results from the Heart, I'm trying to communicate with distance, but video conferencing and so forth. And I have had the relationship for like 5, 6 years with the company. And given the different background, like in the board members and management, with the client, with management consulting practice, I have the same issue of how to communicate, how to align the way, and make sense out of it from my point of view, from their point of view, and together we find the passage going forward. So relating to the society in business is in such a manner, but friends and others are the same. If we can align and communicate, share it, the values and way of living, and help each other, that makes sense. And we need to have a good way of processing it. I have posted some videos with two other persons who happen to be 73 years old. One is a Swedish and one is Kiwi. We talk about the philosophy, business, love, society, all of that. It's another example of such way that I see that I want to process it. So back to this mail writing, I put the general concept, then I stay with it. And while I'm sleeping, often I come up with the idea. So it may happen, and it did happen, every 2 hours I wake up and then add one phrase or additional sentence and go back to sleep. And then it's like a dream. If you have a concern, the unconscious part, which we call it unconscious, but the universe is telling, that's another funny expression. Something is happening because my brain and body, whole structure, the heart and everything, while we are resting, the brainwave goes to the beta to alpha as if to process the information. So living being makes sense out of it when you are sleeping. So as much as the blood flows and the nutrition process and the breathing and the oxygen and the hormone, all of that is performing its job without the mind as much because the universe is functioning. The law of nature is functioning. It's beyond the mind capability for that to function, and that's going on. And that is the root of our being, how we develop in its performing, and the mind need to be connected well. Otherwise, we have the mind universe and the being universe of who we are, a gap developed. And if we think what's in the mind is the whole important and forget that the rest, then that's misconnecting. Spiritual is one word to communicate this message. I don't know if there's any word. And in Tao Te Ching, they say, nameless, if you put the name, that's not Tao. Name is more mind, and the communication to the root has to go beyond the mind language communication. So that's the communication I do within myself, root of my being, whether it's in the sleep or in the morning, and therefore the mail writing takes time. Easy to write, in 5 minutes I can do it, outline and all that, but the content and how people may read the sentence and the word and whether or not I can communicate is a big information, big fact, big effort that it takes. And even if I can solidify my own idea, how you express may have another big issue. So in Buddhism, they talk about the Sangha, group of people who can share the view, who are on the same path, then we can develop the good sharing process and communication, possibly. So there's a culture and the values that develop, and it's the same situation if we are to interface with the society, who to interface with, and which direction, and what platform, including the website and the clubs or the membership or the association in the Facebook channel and all that, media resources, and how you can connect to that. That is to be resolved in some way or the other. And we have to have this gyroscope and the sensory mechanism so that if the connection is not there, what do? You may have to cut certain connection for the sake of the total activity of what I do, if it doesn't make sense from the mind point of view or from the root of our being, so that all of that takes wisdom, judgment, focus on the things that you can make the most of it, fully to be alive, and such is the process that we have to find in relationship, whatever we do. And I started with this email thing, but I'm expanding to how the rest of my day is constituted or composed with the same principle. So I mentioned about the email and also video conferencing, text and message, and the relationship to the website, where to go, how to process, and then draw a line in certain area. Okay, so you prioritize. You have the navigation with the life profile kind of idea, 3-4 months, every 3 months. But during the day, I need to navigate so that the whole activity makes sense, not sub-optimizing in the sense of like hitting the head into the wall when things are not working. Then, like in this case of the board or the company relationship, if the result is not in line to the way that I see and we cannot communicate, then there has to be a decision made, judgment made, so that you find the wisdom how to deal with it. I think it's simple if you use the language to capture, but actual process of it requires lots of, let's call it the ball of catchball from the mind and heart, or the root of the being. In fact, it has to be done continuously as much as possible, but in some cases like sleeping and waking up, coming up with the idea and go back to sleep, it may go back and forth, taking time. Therefore, even one simple email, I think this was maybe 6 paragraphs, took half of a day or more. And then I'm still giving time to rest without sending back. In the meantime, I sent to my friend Brian to review it to see if he's got any comment. I have friends like Brian and Christina that we can go deeper into connecting and make sense out of it, each to understand where they are from and be able to be open, transparent, and find the interaction interesting. And I think that's wonderful to have those friends. It's like a triangulating, so that I can find the path, but other person can take a look at it and share it. And I think YouTube videos that I've been posting is one representation of that. In that case, I may not find a friend, or I may have some friend coming back every now and then and share. But even without that, the life goes on, and the issues in my life, I find some wisdom or interesting insight. I like to share it. So it happens on my own. Of course, that's natural, because I want to be sincere and truthful to myself, and whatever the key information I can pick up, so that I can make sure that I'm on the right path, or even off the path and injury and all that, then I learn from the lesson and come up with it. Or even within the middle of it, I have posted the issues, some of the concerns. All of that is related to be on the right path, hero's journey, or whatever you call it, spiritual journey. So, reflecting on the yesterday and this morning, those are the events, and maybe I'll just cut short the rest of it in a few minutes because I think I spent lots of time on these things. All I can say is that that's the principle, and more I realize how I'm walking on this path, I am to be aware more often as to what's going on, so that when the thought pops up, divert my attention, I notice it. I notice it from the brain too, not just accepting and digesting to figure out, like taking time. Sometimes more instantaneous, that the thought pops up and start to divert my attention from the main issue, like a drawing me back into some memories and stay with it for whatever the reason is. And I can just cut it out because it's not useful for the time being of what I'm doing. That's just the plan to check Sila Samadhi Panya on practice. Not every 3-4 months, not daily. I have those black dot exercise and all that for the daily check, but moment to moment practice and being aware of what's going on, how the mind is functioning, and connecting to the root so that I make judgment, wisdom, come out, and move on. So, as it turned out, this is more than the usual length of the video, but may capture some of the activities that I use, I be in this setting. Blue sky getting bluer, and it's quiet. It's day's beginning. It's still 6 o'clock or somewhere around there. The tree is still standing, the pine tree. It's the beginning of another day. May all beings be happy. Wishing you a good journey of life, as well as for myself and as a society, as a human. Thank you.